Veteran and his dog took shelter in Grandma's treehouse, then found a $220 million secret beneath it. They thought the $220 million was the miracle. But the real miracle was how a broken veteran followed his dog into a secret meant for a better man than he believed he was. And the truth he uncovered didn't just change his life. It forced the world to reckon with what loyalty can save and what greed can destroy. The road into Silver Pine Valley twisted like a scar through the mountains, and Cole Harrington followed it in silence. After 20 years away, the landscape felt unfamiliar and familiar at the same time. Pine trees leaned over the single-lane road, as if they were studying the man coming home too late. The old Chevy rattled with every mile. Ranger, his German shepherd, sat upright in the passenger seat, head high, ears forward, watching the way a soldier watches a breach. Not panicked, not restless, just aware. Ranger always knew the difference between ordinary quiet and dangerous quiet. Cole had learned to trust that. He rolled down the window. The air carried the scent of wet dirt and resin, the exact smell that used to cling to his grandmother Nora's sweaters when she hugged him as a boy. She had been gone for years, but her treehouse, sitting deep in the forest on her last piece of land, was the only place left that wasn't tied to loss. His chest tightened when the clearing finally opened. The oak tree stood where it always had, trunk thick, branches twisting like old hands trying to hold the sky together. But the treehouse perched above it sagged on one side, planks darkened by rain and time. It looked like something abandoned long before he ever left for Iraq. Cole killed the engine. The silence hit like a wave. Ranger jumped out first, paws sinking into damp earth. He didn't roam the way normal dogs did. Instead, he froze for a breath, nose twitching, muscles locked in that way that meant he was listening to something Cole couldn't hear. Cole exhaled. Just us now. He slung his pack over his shoulder and limped toward the base of the oak, his left leg throbbing the way it always did when the weather shifted. A roadside bomb outside Mosul had left him with metal in bone and memory in muscle. Some days he forgot which hurt more. Ranger circled the tree once, twice, then stopped so abruptly Cole's heart kicked. The dog lowered his body, nose pressed to the bark, paws digging hard at the roots. "What is it, boy?" Ranger didn't bark. He growled, low and certain, the way he used to when he caught the scent of explosives during searches. That sound had saved Cole more than once. Cole knelt beside him. Moss clung to the base of the trunk, thick and soft. Ranger kept pawing the same spot, precise, like he wasn't guessing but remembering. Cole brushed away the moss. There it was, a small wooden panel carved directly into the trunk. Too perfect to be natural, too hidden to be accidental. Cole's throat tightened. His fingers touched the seam. It shifted. He pulled his multi-tool from his pocket, wedged the blade under the edge, and pried. The panel released with a tired sigh of old wood. Behind it was a small compartment lined with dark cloth. Inside lay a leather pouch, worn thin, and a folded letter. Cole knew the handwriting before he even opened it. Nora's loops were soft, patient, the kind of handwriting from someone who believed ink could hold warmth. "My dear Cole, if you are reading this, then life has carried you farther than your heart could bear. I saved what little I could. There are things this tree still protects, things older than you know. Trust your instincts. Remember, some roots grow stronger when the world breaks around them. Love, Grandma Nora." Cole opened the pouch slowly. Cold metal slid into his palm. Gold coins, heavy, real, stamped with eagles and years older than his grandmother ever looked. He stared at them until the forest blurred. He tried to swallow the heat rising in his chest, but it pushed through anyway. He had slept in deserts, bled in alleys, buried friends in countries that never knew their names. Nothing rattled him anymore, but this did. Ranger nudged his shoulder. steady and grounding. Cole rested a hand on the dog's neck. "Thanks, buddy." By late afternoon, he had cleared enough brush to reach the old ladder. The rungs were cracked, but he tested each one anyway, moving slowly, feeling the pull in his bad leg. Ranger paced below, glancing up every few seconds as if he expected trouble to come from above. Cole hauled himself onto the platform. The inside of the treehouse smelled of dust, cedar, and a life that ended before he ever learned how to fix anything. A broken lantern lay near the corner. The floor sagged where rain had soaked the boards. He sat with his back against the trunk, the letter still in his hand. He hadn't come for gold. He came because there was nowhere else left to go. Ranger climbed up the repaired ladder like he had done it for years. He lay beside Cole, chest rising slow, eyes fixed on the open doorway. Outside, the forest whispered. At first it was only wind, then something else, a soft creak. Too light to be an animal, too intentional to be chance. Ranger lifted his head. Every muscle sharpened. Cole reached for the hunting knife on his belt. The sound came again. A branch snapping. Light footfall. Someone, or something, moving just beyond the clearing. Ranger stood, silent, shoulders squared. He didn't bark. He didn't charge. He simply pointed his body toward the sound like a compass finding true north. Cole's pulse climbed. He whispered, "You feel that too." Ranger didn't look back. He stayed locked on the darkness beyond the trees. Cole scanned the forest. A shape flickered between trunks. Human, watching. Then gone, swallowed by the woods before Cole could blink. A chill slid down his spine. He looked at Ranger. The dog's amber eyes held the truth long before Cole said it aloud. "Someone else has been here." Ranger thumped his tail once, not in comfort, but in answer. Cole tightened his grip on the knife and stared into the tree line, feeling something he hadn't felt since the war. Not fear. Recognition. The sense that whatever waited in those woods was connected to the gold, the letter, and the secrets Nora had buried long before he ever knew he'd come home again. And it wasn't done with him yet. Morning came slow in Silver Pine Valley, the kind of grey light that felt unfinished. Cole woke to the familiar ache in his leg and the unfamiliar sound of Ranger pacing. Not restless. Focused. The dog's nails clicked against the old boards, moving in a tight loop near the far corner of the treehouse. Ranger stopped, lowered his head, and breathed deep into the seams between the planks. Cole watched him from where he sat, rubbing warmth back into stiff muscles. "You got something?" Ranger didn't lift his head. He pressed his nose harder to the wood, sniffing, pausing, then circling back to the exact same spot. He did it again. And again. Determined. Cole pushed himself up. He knelt beside Ranger and slid his palm over the floorboard. The plank looked no different from the others. A little warped, soft from years of rain. But when he tapped it lightly with his knuckle, the sound carried a hollow echo. That was new. He felt the shift in the air. Ranger felt it too. The dog stepped back just enough to stand guard beside him, muscles tight, tail stiff. Cole tapped the board again. Same sound. Hollow, but not naturally hollow. Not rot. More like something was beneath it, something placed there. He reached for his multi-tool but paused. Not yet. The night before still clung to him. The shadow in the trees, the sense of being watched, the gold hidden inside the trunk. His grandmother's letter whispering about roots that grew stronger when the world broke. Whatever lay under the floor wasn't going anywhere, and he needed to make this place livable before he started digging up ghosts. He stood, grabbed the broom he found in the corner, and cleared debris from the platform outside. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine sap and last night's moisture. He hammered loose boards back into place, tied rope supports along weakened beams, and patched a gap in the roof with old tarp. Ranger stayed close, ears swiveling at every distant sound. Every few minutes, the dog froze, nose up, eyes sharp, tracking something in the woods. Cole followed his gaze but saw nothing. Only trees, only quiet. But quiet could lie. As he secured the tarp, Ranger stiffened again. Cole looked up. Through the branches came a brief flicker of light. Not sunlight. Something artificial, moving between trunks. Then gone. Someone's out there. Ranger's low growl rippled through the boards. Cole felt the old habit settle in. Calming breath. Eyes scanning. Weight shifting off his bad leg. He reached toward the hunting knife at his belt out of instinct. But nothing moved. Not the branches, not the shadows, just the memory of light lingering like a warning. A truck engine rumbled faintly from the distance, rolling up the dirt road. Cole descended the ladder slowly. Ranger followed, posture alert. A white SUV pulled into the clearing. It stopped a few yards from the old oak. The door opened, and a woman stepped out, brushing dust from her jeans. Cole blinked. May Collins. He hadn't seen her since their 20s. Back then she had a quick laugh, quicker temper, and a way of making trouble feel like adventure. Now she wore a navy coat and carried a leather folder tucked under one arm. Her expression was steady, almost unreadable, but her presence tugged something old and familiar in him. She took one look at Ranger and smiled. So this is the partner you keep talking about in your letters. Ranger trotted up to her, not wagging, just studying her with serious eyes. She extended a hand, and he sniffed it with slow, deliberate caution before giving one quick lick, the closest thing he ever gave to approval. Cole stepped forward. Didn't know anyone knew I was back. May shrugged. Small valley. Your truck passed the general store yesterday. Gossip moves faster than weather. Her eyes drifted to the treehouse. She nodded at it. That place survived longer than anyone thought it would. Barely. But you came back to it. That says something. Cole didn't answer. He didn't know how to. May walked a slow circle around the clearing, scanning the trees like she was taking inventory. She stopped at the spot where Ranger had growled the night before. She glanced down at the disturbed pine needles, then back at Cole. Someone's been out here. He stiffened. What makes you think that? Tracks. Heavy ones. Not yours. And your dog is about 5 heartbeats away from tackling a ghost. Ranger sat at Cole's side, watching her. Waiting. May folded her arms, her voice dropping. Cole, I came because there's been strange activity around the valley these past few months. Outsiders asking about land deeds, old investment groups, property records tied to people long dead. And now you, showing up after 20 years to the one place no one's been able to buy from the county. His jaw clenched. This place isn't for sale. I know that. The question is whether they know it. The wind rustled through the canopy, lifting the fine hairs on Cole's arms. Ranger shifted closer, brushing his leg with silent warning. May stepped toward him. I'm not here as a lawyer. I'm here because something's off. And if your grandmother Nora left anything behind on this land, anything of value, trust me, someone will come looking for it. Cole thought of the gold in the trunk. The letter. The hollow plank. The flicker of light moving between the trees, the shadow that vanished before he could name it. He felt his heartbeat change. Ranger's ears snapped forward. He barked once, sharp and hard, the kind of bark that pinpointed direction. Across the clearing, a figure darted behind a cluster of cedars. May saw it too. Her voice tightened. That wasn't an animal. Cole moved without thinking. Ranger lunged beside him, powerful and sure. But by the time they reached the tree line, the figure was gone. Not fled. Disappeared. Whoever it was knew the forest well enough to blend into it. May stood beside Cole, breath light, eyes scanning the dark between branches. She whispered, "That's why I came. People are circling this place, and whatever they want, they're getting closer." Ranger stayed rigid, chest rising fast but steady, gaze fixed on the woods. Cole looked down at him. "What do you know that I don't, buddy?" Ranger didn't blink. He just stared into the trees as if he were waiting for something to step back out. Or someone. The afternoon sun barely pushed through the canopy as Cole swept debris off the treehouse floor. Dust lifted in thin currents, drifting through beams of light like old memories rising where they were not invited. Ranger lay near the doorway, watching the woods instead of resting, ears pricked for the slightest break in the quiet. When Cole knelt to tighten a loose bolt along the wall, Ranger stood abruptly. The dog's entire posture sharpened, tail stiff, shoulders tightening. He stepped across the floor, nose dragging low, tracing an invisible line from board to board. Cole froze. "You found something again." Ranger stopped at the same corner he had been obsessing over since morning, but this time he didn't circle. He placed one paw on the board and looked back at Cole, eyes steady, almost commanding. Cole tapped the plank. The hollow echo came through louder than before. Not normal hollow. Purposeful hollow. He crouched lower, listening to the vibrations traveling beneath the wood. Whatever was under there had weight. Weight that belonged to more than dirt or air. Ranger stepped back, but not far. He stayed close enough that his breath warmed Cole's arm, guarding, making sure nothing inside that hidden space would take his handler by surprise. "All right, let's see what you've been trying to tell me." Cole wedged the flat edge of his multi-tool into the seam and pried gently. The old board resisted at first, then shifted with a reluctant groan. He lifted it slowly, careful not to splinter the edges. Ranger lowered his head, staring into the dark gap beneath the floor. A steel box rested inside, edges rusted, corners dented from years of pressure. It looked old enough to have been placed there before Cole was even born. Dust clung to it in thick layers. Cole reached in and lifted it. The weight startled him. Heavy enough to be important. Heavy enough to change a life. Ranger backed up a step, giving him space. Cole sat cross-legged on the floor and ran his palm across the metal surface. The box had no lock, just a thick latch, sealed by time and tension. He slid his thumb beneath it and pushed upward. The latch cracked open with a metallic snap that echoed through the treehouse. Inside lay faded cloth, wrapping several stacks of yellowed documents. Cole unwrapped the first bundle. Thick paper, printed seals, signatures, stock certificates. He flipped one over. Apple Computer Incorporated, dated 1981. The next bore the early logo of Microsoft, then Intel, then a company he didn't recognize but remembered hearing on an old podcast about pre-boom Silicon Valley. He stared, breath thinning. These weren't worthless scraps. They were bearer certificates from the early days, untouched, unclaimed. Every single one represented compounded growth over 4 decades. Hundreds of millions, maybe more. Ranger nudged his shoulder once, grounding him before he drifted too far into shock. Cole swallowed hard. His hands shook as he reached deeper into the box and found a small, sealed envelope. The same handwriting as the letter in the trunk. Nora's loops. Steady. Full of the patience she used on him when he was a boy trying to build a birdhouse that wouldn't stand straight. He opened it carefully. "My Cole, you were never meant to find this young. You were meant to find it when you were tired, worn, searching for direction instead of escape. These investments were given to me long ago by someone who believed in beginnings. I protected them for the day you would understand what to do with them. You will know when it is time. Use them for the world you wish existed. Your grandmother, Nora." Cole stared at the words until the letters blurred. Ranger sat beside him, pressing a steady paw against his thigh as if to anchor him. He whispered, She knew I'd come home like this. Ranger blinked once, slow, solemn. Cole repacked the papers as carefully as if they were glass and returned the box to its hiding place. He replaced the board, pressing it tight into its original grooves. But the pressure in his chest didn't ease, because this wasn't just money, it was intent. A message left beneath floorboards like a time-delayed truth. He sat back, breath unsteady. Ranger growled. Not confusion. Alert, Cole stood, scanning the room. Ranger moved to the doorway, posture rigid. His nose twitched, then locked on something outside. Cole followed his gaze through the cracks in the wall. Footprints, fresh ones, leading away from the treehouse. Deep impressions in the damp soil. Not from May's boots. Not from his. Bigger, and more than one set. Cole's jaw tightened. The sense of being watched the night before was no longer a feeling. It was a fact. He knelt beside Ranger. You knew they were here. Ranger didn't look at him. He stayed locked on the tree line, tail low, hackles lifting one hair at a time. Cole stepped outside and examined the prints. Whoever came through wasn't trying to be quiet. They had walked right up to the base of the tree, stood there, and then left. Or left because they heard Cole coming. He scanned the woods. No bird song, no squirrels, just a heavy silence waiting to break. Ranger pressed against his leg. Ready. Cole whispered, "Someone else knows, boy." A twig snapped far off in the woods. A flash of movement cut across the deeper shadows. Ranger tensed to run, but Cole placed a hand on his shoulder. Not yet. The wind pushed through the valley, bending the grass, shifting the light, making the shadows ripple like something breathing beneath them. Cole felt it now. Not fear, not shock, a cold certainty. The secret Nora buried wasn't hidden anymore. Someone had been searching for it long before he ever returned. And Ranger, standing beside him with that unblinking stare, seemed to already understand the truth before Cole could say it aloud. This wasn't an accident. This was the beginning. May sat on the edge of the treehouse platform, the steel box open between them. The late afternoon light slanted across the documents, turning the old ink a deep amber. She picked up one certificate carefully, as if even her breath might damage it. These are real, Cole. Every one of them. He already knew it. The weight of the box, the age of the paper, Nora's handwriting. But hearing May say it out loud made the truth settle deeper, heavier. He leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. Then why do I feel like this is a problem and not a blessing? May studied another document. Because bearer stocks are untraceable. Whoever holds them controls them. No name, no chain of custody, just possession, which means if someone wants them, they don't have to take you to court. They can just take you. Ranger lifted his head at that, shifting closer to Cole, the soft scrape of his claws breaking the tension. Cole rubbed the dog's neck absently. You think someone's already looking? May hesitated. She had the same tight look she used to get before telling him something he wouldn't want to hear. Cole, I saw footprints outside before I walked up. Fresh, heavy, not yours. Cole felt the cold rise inside him, pulsing at the base of his skull. The same cold that used to hit before an ambush. The same shift in the air, like something unseen had just moved a step closer. May lowered her voice. Your grandmother didn't hide millions for the fun of it. She knew something. She was protecting something. And now you need to protect yourself. He closed the steel box and slid it back under the floorboard. Ranger followed the motion with watchful eyes, then returned to the doorway and lay down, angled toward the clearing, guarding the way a soldier guards a perimeter. May rose to her feet. I can help with the legal part, but the rest... She glanced at Ranger. You're going to need him. They climbed down together. The sun dipped behind the ridge, casting long shadows across the clearing. May walked to her SUV, But before getting in, she paused. One more thing. If someone else knows about those certificates, they won't stop with a visit. They'll come back, and they won't come alone. Cole nodded once, jaw tight. May gave Ranger a final nod, as if entrusting the dog with something more than protection, then drove off down the gravel road. Cole watched the dust settle. Ranger watched the forest. Night eased in quickly, the kind of mountain darkness that swallowed sound. Cole lit a small lantern inside the treehouse, keeping the flame low, careful. Ranger remained at the doorway, chest rising in steady breaths, ears rotating to every crack outside. Cole tried to focus on repairing the far wall, but his hands kept drifting. His mind kept dragging him backward. To the convoy that never made it past the bridge outside Mosul, to the radio static right before the explosion, to the moment dust filled his mouth, and he realized he couldn't hear anything except his own pulse, to the bodies he couldn't reach. He dragged a hand over his face. Not now. But the past had a way of slamming into him at night when the world was already too quiet. Ranger's sudden growl snapped him back. The dog stood, rigid, staring through the cracks in the planks. His entire frame sharpened, tail lifted, muscles tight. A low rumble came from his chest, deep enough to vibrate the boards. Cole moved to his side. "What do you see?" Ranger didn't blink. He stared into the darkness. Then Cole saw it too. A faint movement between the trees. Not an animal, too tall, too deliberate. A human silhouette, half hidden behind one of the pines. Watching. Ranger stepped forward, teeth bared, shoulders squared, ready. Cole pressed a steadying hand to his neck. No. Hold. The figure didn't move closer. It didn't speak. It just stood there, as if calculating, learning the layout of the land. Testing. Cole's breath tightened. His heartbeat shifted, not fast, but controlled. The same locked-in calm from Afghanistan, when adrenaline and clarity blurred into one feeling. Another figure stepped beside the first. Shorter, broader. Two pairs of eyes reflecting faint glimmers of lantern light. Ranger barked once, loud, sharp, echoing through the valley. The figures vanished into the trees. Cole grabbed his rifle and scanned the clearing, but the forest swallowed everything. No footsteps, no broken branches, as if they had melted back into the dark. Ranger didn't relax. He stayed at the doorway, head low, nose tracking faint trails of scent Cole couldn't begin to detect. Cole whispered, "You're telling me something, aren't you?" Ranger flicked an ear back towards him, then forward again, locked on the woods. Cole sat beside him, both of them framed by the doorway, both staring into the dark that seemed to stare back. May was right. Someone else knew. Not just about the land, not just about Nora, but about the box, the certificates, the value that could shift lives and tempt the kind of men who didn't take no for an answer. Cole's jaw clenched. His fingers tightened around the rifle's grip. Ranger leaned against his leg, not in fear, but in solidarity. A silent vow. Cole breathed out, slowly. If they wanted what Nora left behind, they would have to come through both of them. And Ranger, staring into the trees with eyes that missed nothing, seemed ready long before Cole felt it himself. The knock came just after noon, a sharp rhythm that didn't belong in the quiet of Silver Pine Valley. Cole froze on the ladder, halfway through securing a new support beam. Ranger lifted his head first, hackles rising, a growl already building before the sound fully registered. Cole climbed down slowly. He didn't recognize the black SUV parked in the clearing or the man standing beside it, straight-backed, polished shoes sinking into the dirt like they resented being here. The stranger adjusted his tie and looked up at the treehouse with the kind of smile bankers used when circling a foreclosure. His hair was slicked back, his suit charcoal gray, untouched by dust. Mr. Harrington, I assume. Cole stepped forward but didn't answer. Ranger stood at his side, body angled between Cole and the man, teeth barely visible beneath a silent snarl. The stranger didn't flinch. My name is Victor Dane. I represent clients with legal interest in the late Nora Harrington's assets. Cole kept his stance still. What kind of clients? Victor offered a thin smile. The kind who prefer efficiency over conflict. They are prepared to compensate you generously. $10 million wired immediately. No questions, no delays. In exchange, we receive certain documents that were left in your grandmother's possession. Ranger barked, one explosive sound that tore through the clearing. Victor's mask cracked for half a second before reforming. He brushed off his sleeve, pretending the bark had unsettled only the dust. Cole folded his arms. I don't have anything for your clients. Victor's smile tightened. Let's not waste time. We know exactly what was left in this treehouse, and we know you found it. Cole stepped closer. This is private property. Leave. Victor exhaled through his nose, as though Cole were a slow student. Mr. Harrington, what you're holding is extremely valuable and extremely unsafe. People have killed for less. Cole's jaw clenched. Not my problem. Ah, but it will be. Victor leaned in slightly. You have no legal claim to those certificates. They predate you. They belong to someone with deeper pockets and a longer memory. My clients are giving you a chance to walk away with more money than you've seen in your life. Ranger lunged forward, stopping only because Cole's hand brushed his shoulder. Victor stumbled back, rattled for the first time. Cole's voice dropped. Get off my land. Victor straightened, shook out his coat, and stared at Cole with something colder than anger. You should reconsider. The next people who come won't be as civil as I am. Cole didn't respond. Ranger didn't blink. Victor walked to his SUV, each step crisp and deliberate. Before stepping in, he turned back. This was the friendly version, Mr. Harrington. The SUV rolled away, gravel spraying like warning shrapnel. Cole didn't breathe until it disappeared. Ranger pressed against his leg, muscles tight. Cole whispered, We're not alone anymore. Night fell faster than usual, the kind of quick darkness that felt unnatural. Cole kept the lantern low inside the treehouse, shadows flickering across the walls. Ranger patrolled from window to window, paws silent, tail rigid. Cole couldn't shake Victor's words. Uncivil men, long memories, hidden claims. And the look in Victor's eyes, like he already owned everything around them. Around midnight, Ranger stopped dead in the center of the room. His body locked into place, head lifting, nose twitching once, twice. Then he growled, deep and vibrating, the sound of impending danger. Cole stood, rifle in hand. What is it, boy? Ranger moved to the trap door that led down the ladder and stared at it with fierce intent. Then the first sound hit, a twig snapping, another, footsteps, multiple, surrounding the clearing. Cole killed the lantern. The darkness became thick and total. Ranger moved beside him, steady as stone. Voices whispered outside. Then boots struck the ladder, shaking the whole structure. Cole crouched by the doorway. Shadows moved along the outer walls. Metal glinted. Guns! The trap door rattled. Someone tried to pry it open. Ranger growled so violently the boards vibrated. Then the door burst upward, and a man climbed through, pistol raised. Before Cole could fire, Ranger launched himself across the room like a comet. Dog and intruder collided. The gun flew across the floor. Ranger latched onto the man's arm, teeth sinking through fabric, dragging him down with brutal force. Another man vaulted through the hatch. Cole struck him with the rifle stock, sending him crashing into the far wall. The third climbed halfway through, firing blindly, bullets shredding splinters into the air. Ranger yelped, sharp and sudden, as a shot grazed his shoulder. He didn't let go. His jaws only tightened. Cole grabbed the attacker by the collar, slammed him to the floor, and pinned him with his knee. The man dropped a folded piece of paper from his vest. Cole snatched it and held him down with the rifle. "Who sent you?" The man groaned, bleeding from Ranger's bite. "You think you're the only one there watching?" Cole pressed harder. "Who?" The man gasped. "Your grandmother wasn't just sitting on money. She was part of something. A club, old investors, people who vanished, people our bosses still want answered for." Cole stared at him, voice low. "Nora never hurt anybody." "No, but she knew something, and now you do too." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, faint but approaching. Someone must have called Sheriff Dalton. Or maybe May, sensing things had gone too quiet. The gunman looked up with a twisted smile. "You think this ends with us?" Cole struck him again, knocking him out. He rushed to Ranger, who was still standing, legs trembling, blood on his fur. Cole knelt, voice raw. "You held the line. You saved us." Ranger leaned into him, shaking but alert, refusing to collapse. Cole wrapped his arms around the dog and held him tight, listening to the sirens grow louder, knowing the truth had shifted again. This wasn't about money. Not anymore. It was about a secret Nora carried, a network of people who had guarded something valuable and dangerous enough that others were still hunting for it decades later. And now that secret was in his hands, and in Ranger's blood. The rain came without warning, a hard mountain downpour that hammered the valley before dusk. Cole tightened the last strip of gauze around Ranger's shoulder. The wound from the night before had slowed the dog's gait but hadn't dimmed the fire in his eyes. Ranger sat upright, watching the treehouse entrance as if guarding a battlefield. Cole kept the rifle close. He moved from window to window, scanning the forest. The world outside looked washed clean, but the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like the pause between breaths. Ranger stiffened. Cole froze. "What is it, boy?" Ranger's ears tilted forward, body leaning a fraction toward the clearing below. Then he growled, low and certain. Cole leaned toward the slats. A faint glimmer of movement flashed through the trees, then another, shadows shifting with intention. He whispered, "They're here again." The first attack had been desperate and sloppy. This felt rehearsed. A second shadow cut across the tree line, crouched low, holding something heavy. The ladder shook. Footsteps, more than 2 or 3. Dozens, maybe. Ranger moved first, positioning himself between Cole and the hatch, teeth bared, muscles tight. The pounding started. Someone rammed the ladder with a metal bar, shaking the treehouse violently. Another man attempted to climb under the cover of the storm. Thunder drowned the sound of their footsteps, but Ranger tracked every movement with surgical precision. Cole killed the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. Rain roared against the roof. Voices shouted below, muffled but urgent. "Break the damn door!" Ranger snarled. Cole steadied the rifle. Then the unmistakable whine of a power tool cut through the storm. They were soaring through the reinforced hatch. Cole's pulse steadied. He had been here before, in desert cities, in ruined outposts, waiting for a breach. But here, in his grandmother's treehouse, it carried a different kind of weight. Ranger nudged him sharply. "What is it?" Cole followed Ranger's gaze to the far corner of the room. Ranger pawed at the floor, then looked back at Cole with an intensity that felt almost human. Cole knelt, pressed his palm flat against the boards, and felt it. A faint shift. Not the hollow plank from before. Deeper. Older. Ranger pawed again, insistent. Cole gripped the edge and pulled. A square panel disguised as part of the floor lifted, revealing a dark opening downward. Cold air rose from below, smelling of earth and cedar. A hidden tunnel. Nora had built more than a treehouse. She had built an escape. Lightning cracked, illuminating the clearing like a camera flash. Cole saw them clearly now. 6, maybe 7 armed men, some dragging equipment, others covering angles. The hatch shuddered. Screws popped. The door was seconds from giving out. Cole whispered, "Ranger, down." The dog slipped into the tunnel without hesitation, wounded shoulder brushing the earth but not slowing him. Cole slung the steel box over his back, lowered himself into the darkness, and pulled the panel closed just as the hatch above exploded inward. Boots crashed into the treehouse. Voices cursed. Someone fired into the walls, spraying splinters. Cole moved. Ranger led the way through the cramped tunnel, crawling with his body low, his breathing steady. The earth pressed in tight, roots twisting like old veins. The air grew cooler as they advanced. Above them, the attackers tore through the room. Find the box. Find him. Go through the floor. Cole pushed faster. The tunnel curved sharply, leading them under the hillside and deeper into the forest. Ranger paused twice to listen, then moved again, always ahead, never faltering. For a dog wounded hours earlier, he moved like something pulled by instinct older than memory. Cole whispered, "Good boy. Keep going." Rain seeped through cracks overhead. The sound above shifted, shouts, crashing, someone yelling to spread out to search the woods. Then a gunshot, then 2. But not from inside the treehouse, from the forest. Ranger stopped. Ears lifted. He knew those gunshots. Cole crawled faster, emerging from the mouth of the tunnel into a thicket of ferns. Ranger bolted forward, clearing the brush. Cole followed, rifle ready. Voices broke through the storm. "Drop your weapons. Hands in the air." Sheriff Dalton's voice, firm, measured. And May's voice, sharp, commanding. "Step away from the clearing now." Cole pushed through the foliage and saw them, Dalton and 3 deputies, rifles raised, flashlights slicing through the rain. May stood behind a fallen log, holding a pistol with steady hands. The attackers had scattered, trying to retreat, but someone was guiding Dalton's men through the woods with uncanny precision. A silhouette stepped from behind the sheriff's truck, one of the intruders from the night before. His arm was bandaged, his face bruised. The man who had dropped the paper. A man who should have been an enemy. Cole recognized him instantly. Dalton leaned toward him. "You sure they'll come this way?" The man nodded weakly. "They always run downslope when they panic." A distraction, then. A betrayal flipped into an advantage. The enemy had turned. The woods erupted with gunfire. Deputies fired warning shots. Branches snapped. Someone ran through the brush but was tackled by a deputy before reaching the riverbed. Another man tried to circle behind the patrol cars. May fired a single shot into the air, freezing him mid-step. Dalton took him to the ground. Ranger stood beside Cole, growling low, ears wired forward. Lightning split the sky again. A third attacker rushed toward Cole from the left, weapon raised, but Ranger launched before Cole could lift the rifle. The dog hit the man square in the chest, knocking the gun loose. The attacker stumbled, crashed into the mud, and Dalton's deputy cuffed him before he could recover. Rain hammered the trees. Steam rose from the muddy ground. The forest felt alive with motion and danger and sudden calm. Within minutes, it was over. 3 men arrested. 1 unconscious. 2 more pinned down by deputies farther downhill. The rest scattered, but tracked by the sheriff's team. Dalton walked toward Cole, rain dripping from his hat brim. "You all right?" Cole nodded, drenched and breathless. Ranger stayed pressed to his leg, trembling not from fear, but from the adrenaline of a fight he refused to lose. May approached, lowering her pistol. Her voice shook, not from nerves but from the weight of what almost happened. "You were right. They weren't done, not even close." Cole looked down at Ranger, whose fur was soaked, eyes bright in the stormlight. He knelt, resting a hand on the dog's neck. "You led us out. You saved my life again." Ranger leaned into him, exhausted but unbroken. Dalton studied the ruined clearing in the distance. "Whoever these men are, they're not freelancers. Someone bigger is pulling strings. Your grandmother was in deeper than any of us guessed." Cole stared into the dark ridge beyond the valley, where the last of the intruders had vanished. Nora hadn't just hidden money. She had hidden a secret worth mobilizing men who had no problem firing into a treehouse, and now every step Cole took would move him closer to the truth she left behind. The storm eased, but the weight of what waited ahead only grew heavier. Ranger pressed against him again, strong and steady. He was the only thing that hadn't wavered, the only compass still pointing north. The storm had barely faded when the valley shifted into an unusual calm. The forest held its breath the morning after the arrests, as if waiting to see what Cole would do with everything that had fallen into his hands. The treehouse still bore the scars of the attack. Broken boards, splintered railings, muddy boot prints smeared across the floor. But it still stood. And Ranger, despite the stitched shoulder, patrolled its perimeter like a guardian who refused to retreat. Sheriff Dalton arrived just after sunrise, documents in hand, raincoat still dripping. May followed him up the rebuilt ladder, her clothes soaked from the night's chaos, but her expression sharp and focused. Cole sat at the center of the treehouse floor with the steel box between his knees. Ranger lay pressed against his side, eyes fixed on the sheriff like he was measuring every move. Dalton cleared his throat. "All right, Harrington, we go through everything exactly as it happened. Then we build a case that sticks. No loose ends, no shadows left to run in." Cole didn't waste time. He handed over every scrap of evidence he'd collected from the intruders. Coded notes, burner phones, security contractor badges, the confession given by the injured man who had turned on his own team. May added copies of property deeds, her own notes from legal research, and the stock certificates she had verified as authentic. Dalton flipped through the bonds, whistling under his breath. "This is more money than most banks handle in a quarter. You sure you're ready for this kind of storm?" Cole looked down at Ranger. The dog nudged his hand, steady and grounding. "Yeah, I'm ready." May sat across from him, hands folded over a stack of forms. The moment she spoke, everything in the air shifted. "Cole, these assets are legally yours. No loopholes, no competing claims. Your grandmother's estate falls to you as the sole living heir, but you need to decide what happens next. This isn't pocket change. It's legacy-level power." Cole didn't look at the forms. He stared at the treehouse walls, at the beams his grandmother had set by hand decades ago, then at Ranger, who watched him with unwavering, quiet faith. He spoke slowly. "I didn't survive war to drown in fortune. And Nora didn't hide all this to make me rich. She hid it because she believed it could be used right." May tilted her head. "And what does right look like to you?" Cole stood and walked to the window. The clearing below still held the tire tracks of the sheriff's patrol trucks, the scars left by the men who came to steal what wasn't theirs. Beyond that, the valley stretched quiet and forgotten, full of people who had been abandoned by the world the same way he once felt abandoned. He took a breath. "I want to build something that lasts, something that helps the kind of people Nora cared about when no one else did. Veterans who come home with pieces missing, families running from violence, kids with nowhere to sleep. I want to build a foundation in her name." May didn't blink. "What would you call it?" "The Nora Foundation, a place where people can start over without fear." Dalton leaned against the rail, eyes narrowing in approval. "That's a hell of a direction to take $220 million. Cole looked at Ranger again. The dog's tail tapped once against the floor, quiet but resolute. "It's the only direction that feels right." The rest of the morning moved with purpose. May drafted the founding documents, notarized statements, asset transfers, and federal filings. Dalton recorded official testimony, sealing it with the county courthouse. Cole read line after line, signing where May pointed, his name becoming the anchor for something larger than himself. By afternoon, the first step was already underway. The treehouse buzzed with hammering and sanding as local volunteers arrived at May's call. A retired carpenter patched the broken hatch. 2 former Marines hauled lumber to reinforce the outer beams. A teenage girl from town painted the entry frame a soft pine green, Nora's favorite color. Cole worked beside them, sleeves rolled up, sawdust clinging to his hair. Ranger limped from one corner to another, inspecting progress with the seriousness of a foreman. Every time a new person climbed the ladder, Ranger sniffed them carefully, deciding whether they passed his invisible criteria. When they did, he leaned his head against their knee before moving on. By sunset, the transformation had begun. The treehouse was no longer a battlefield. It was becoming the heart of something new. May stood next to Cole on the rebuilt porch, arms crossed, watching the volunteers finish cleaning the floor. You realize once this opens, people will come from everywhere. Survivors, vets, families. You ready for that wait? Cole looked at the valley, covered in warm gold light. For the first time in years, he felt a direction instead of a void. I'm not doing it alone. Ranger lifted his head proudly, like he understood the assignment. May smiled. Then she slid a final document toward him. This makes it official. The Nora Foundation. You'll be the founder, the steward, the protector of everything she left behind. Cole signed it. The sound was soft, final, real. As the ink dried, Ranger stepped forward, resting his paw gently on Cole's boot. Cole crouched and pressed his forehead to Ranger's, the world narrowing to the quiet breath between them. You got me here, boy. Couldn't have done any of it without you. Ranger's tail swept the floor. Later that night, lanterns hung along the beams, casting warm light across the refurbished room. Volunteers shared coffee on the porch. Dalton sat against a railing with steaming mugs for 2. May gathered names of counselors willing to help. Cole stood at the center of it all, looking out at the lights below the hill. Lights of the cabins they planned to build next. Lights of futures that hadn't existed yesterday. This wasn't just justice. It was healing. And it was only beginning. 1 year later, Silver Pine Valley didn't feel like the same place Cole had driven into, with nothing but an old duffel bag and a dog who refused to leave his side. The changes didn't come all at once. They came the way healing usually did, in slow breaths and steady days, until one morning the valley woke up and realized it had become something new. The cabins stood first. 6 of them in a neat arc around the old treehouse, each built from reclaimed pine and fitted with warm lights that glowed long into the night. They had names carved above the doors: birch, willow, cedar, maple, names that felt like beginnings rather than endings. Women fleeing violence found their first safe nights there. Veterans who hadn't slept indoors for months found quiet corners they didn't have to defend. Children who had learned to fear every footstep learned to laugh again. Ranger had become part of all of it. Not as a pet, not even as a protector anymore. He had become something the valley didn't have a word for. When volunteers arrived, they asked for him first. When new families stepped off the transport vans, their eyes afraid or cautious, he approached slow, deliberate, tail low and controlled, as if he understood the weight they carried. He seemed to know exactly whose hand needed a nudge, whose trembling shoulders needed a warm body to lean against. By spring, the state recognized him as an official therapy dog, though the valley joked that he had been doing the work long before anyone signed the papers. There wasn't a single person within 50 miles who didn't know the German shepherd with the steady eyes and the grey spreading along his muzzle. Cole changed too. The man who once lived in silence now spent his days teaching. Not in classrooms, and not with the kind of confidence you'd expect from someone in charge of a foundation. His way of teaching happened with his hands. He taught veterans how to build fences and plant crops. He helped repair roofs, mend broken cabin steps, carve walking sticks for the elderly. People followed him not because he spoke loudly, but because he showed up every single day, even when he was tired or even when the nights dredged up dusted pieces of war he couldn't shake. Sometimes, when the valley quieted in the afternoons, he'd sit on the porch of the treehouse and watch Ranger trot between cabins, checking on people the way a sergeant checked on soldiers. The sight always settled something inside Cole that he never managed to explain. May visited nearly daily. Her legal aid job in town became woven into the Foundation's pulse. She handled every dispute, every official filing, every donation. She talked with people who couldn't put their fears into words, then translated those fears into plans, steps, and protections. In 1 year, she had become the Valley's quiet North Star, the one people looked to when they forgot how to move forward. Sometimes, when the sun set and the sky turned that impossible gold that only mountain towns seemed to catch, she and Cole walked the perimeter trail together. At first, they talked only about logistics, permits, schedules, funding. Then the conversations shifted. Stories, childhood memories, what they wished they had done differently, what they were afraid of doing again. There was no romance in it, not yet, just the kind of companionship that grew from walking through hell and deciding not to stay there. One evening in early autumn, the valley gathered for the first anniversary of the Foundation's opening. Lanterns hung between the trees. Children ran barefoot through the clearing. Former soldiers grilled burgers over a fire pit they had built themselves. Music drifted from a wireless speaker someone had duct-taped to a branch. Cole didn't give speeches. He didn't stand in front of crowds. Instead, someone handed him a plaque, made from a cedar board. Engraved on it were the words, "For choosing hope when you had every reason not to." He didn't know who wrote it. Ranger sat beside him, watching the flames, looking every bit like he understood the moment better than Cole did. Later that night, after the laughter thinned and the lanterns dimmed, Cole sat alone on the treehouse steps. Ranger eased down beside him, resting his head on Cole's knee. The dog's breathing was slow, steady, unbreakable. Cole whispered, "You did all this, you know." Ranger didn't move. His tail tapped once, soft as a heartbeat. Cole looked out across the valley. Lights shimmered through the trees. People slept safely tonight because of a box hidden beneath old boards, because a dog refused to give up on him, because a grandmother believed in something that couldn't be measured in money. He thought the year after the storm would be quiet. It wasn't. It was loud with life returning, with hope rebuilding itself plank by plank. But now, this moment, with Ranger pressed into his side and the valley breathing slow around them, felt like the first true quiet he'd known in decades. Cole exhaled, long and steady. "We're doing all right, boy." Ranger lifted his head, nudged Cole's shoulder once, then settled again. And for the first time in years, Cole felt it wasn't just survival anymore. It was purpose. It was belonging. It was home. The morning the school bus pulled into Silver Pine Valley, the air felt different. Not heavier, not lighter, just aware. Like the forest knew new eyes were about to witness something sacred. The students stepped out in clusters, backpacks bouncing, sneakers crunching gravel, laughter echoing against the pines. They were juniors from Silver Pine High, part of a community history project May had arranged. Most of them looked curious. A few looked bored. But all of them went silent the moment Ranger appeared at the top of the hill. The German shepherd walked with the slow authority of an old soldier. He didn't bark, didn't rush. He simply descended the steps of the treehouse like he was welcoming them to a place he had sworn to protect. The kids whispered among themselves, pointing, wide-eyed. A girl near the back murmured, "That's him." the dog from the articles. Cole followed a few steps behind, hands tucked into the pockets of his work jacket. His shoulders carried the kind of weight that didn't bend him anymore. It shaped him. The students took their seats on the benches arranged beneath the oak canopy, and Ranger lay down at Cole's feet, watchful, quiet, patient. May stood at the front, clipboard in hand. She gave a short introduction, but her voice faded as soon as she stepped aside, and Cole moved forward. He didn't command attention. He didn't need to. The valley did it for him. The treehouse stood behind him like a witness, its beams warm with morning light, its windows reflecting the past he once tried to bury. Cole took a breath. I'm not a teacher. I'm just a man who lived through some things. And this dog, he lived through them with me. A ripple of interest spread across the group. Cole pointed toward the treehouse behind him. When I came back from Iraq, I didn't have a home. I didn't have a plan. I thought I was done. Thought the world was done with me. Then I came here. The only place I remembered ever feeling safe. My grandmother's treehouse. He paused. Ranger lifted his head slightly. The first night back, Ranger kept growling at the floorboards. I thought he was reacting to the old wood, or maybe to a squirrel under the beams. But he didn't stop. A boy in the front row leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Cole's voice dropped, steady as falling leaves. He was trying to tell me something I refused to hear. He stepped aside, letting the students see the hatch beneath the rebuilt planks. Right under there, we found a steel box my grandmother had hidden. Inside were stocks worth more than $200 million. Stuff she'd invested in decades before Silicon Valley was a name. Stuff she never spent, never bragged about, never even mentioned. The kids stared like they hadn't blinked since he started talking. But that wasn't the end of it. Cole continued. Someone else knew. Someone dangerous. Men came after it. After me. After him. Ranger shifted, ears twitching at the memory. Cole's jaw tightened. This dog dragged me out of danger more times than I can count. He saved me overseas. He saved me here. He even saved the foundation you're standing in right now. A girl with glasses raised her hand. How did your grandmother know you'd find it? Cole smiled faintly, sadness woven into the curve of his mouth. She didn't. She just believed that when the world went dark enough, I'd come home. She planted something for the day I finally stopped running. He looked down at Ranger again. He was the reason I listened. The students scribbled notes. Some didn't even try. They were too absorbed to look away. Another student asked, So you used the money to build all this? Cole nodded. Money doesn't fix trauma, doesn't rebuild someone's soul, but it can build a place where people can find their way back. That's what the Nora Foundation is. Not a rescue, a restart. Ranger's tail brushed against the dirt at the word restart. Then came the question that silenced even the wind. A boy in a navy hoodie raised his hand slowly, quietly, almost afraid of the answer. If you hadn't listened to Ranger that night, what do you think would have happened to you? The rest of the class turned toward Cole in a single motion, breath held, waiting. Cole didn't speak. Instead, he looked down at Ranger. The old dog met his eyes. Calm, steady, knowing. For a long moment, Cole said nothing at all. Then he crouched, resting a hand on Ranger's back. The dog leaned into him without hesitation. Cole finally looked up at the students. The truth is, I don't think I'd still be here. No one moved. Not a whisper, not a shuffle. Just 20 teenagers suddenly understanding the weight of a life saved. Cole straightened, his hand still on Ranger's fur. If there's one thing I want you to take from this place, it's this. Heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs and refuse to give up on you, even when you've given up on yourself. Ranger let out a soft, low chuff, as if agreeing. The class applauded. Quiet at first, then louder, then rising into something that echoed off the trees and carried across the cabins. Cole didn't bask in it. He simply stepped back, letting Ranger walk ahead of him, letting the students reach out and thank the dog who had changed the valley. Legacy wasn't a thing Cole spoke about. It was the thing walking beside him. The last light of the day stretched across Silver Pine Valley, soft and gold, settling gently over everything the past year had rebuilt. The cabins glowed like lanterns in the dusk. Smoke curled lazily from the fire pit. And up on the hill, perched exactly where it had always stood, the restored treehouse looked less like a relic and more like a promise. Cole sat on the wide front step, boots planted in the worn wood, a mug of cooling coffee beside him. Ranger lay pressed against his leg, chin resting on Cole's knee, the old shepherd's breaths slow and even. Age had crept into his joints, greying his muzzle, softening his gait, but nothing had dimmed the steadiness in his eyes. They had both changed here, and somehow both had returned to exactly who they were meant to be. Below them, a reporter from the Mountain Herald climbed the rebuilt ladder carefully, notebook tucked under her arm. She paused at the top, catching her breath as the sunset painted her face in amber. "Mind if we finish up out here?" she asked. Cole nodded. The reporter sat across from him, brush of wind flipping her pages. She glanced at Ranger, then at the valley, then back at Cole, as if realizing she wasn't just interviewing a man, but the story the valley had grown around him. "You've built something incredible here. People say it all started that first night you came back, when Ranger found the compartment." Cole didn't answer right away. His eyes followed the tree line, where the shadows deepened into the quiet blue of evening. For a moment he drifted back to that night. The cold floorboards, Ranger's low growl, the scrape of metal as he opened a secret his grandmother had hidden before he ever put on a uniform. The reporter lowered her pen. "I have one last question, and it's not for the paper, just for me." Cole raised a brow. "Do you think Ranger knew what he was doing? The very first day?" The valley fell silent. Even the wind paused. Ranger lifted his head, eyes locking on Cole's, like he was waiting for the truth, too. Cole ran a hand through Ranger's fur, feeling the warmth beneath his palm. The years, the loyalty that had never wavered. "Yeah," he said softly. "He knew before I did." The reporter smiled, a quiet, reverent thing. She closed her notebook without writing another word. Some answers didn't need ink. As she descended the ladder and disappeared down the trail, the sun finally slipped behind the ridge. The last rays spilled across the valley, lighting the cabins, the greenhouse, the benches where children had learned to laugh again. It washed over the very soil where Nora's secret had slept for decades, waiting for the right hands to find it. Cole leaned back on his elbows. Ranger shifted until their shoulders touched. "You did good, boy." Cole whispered, "Even when I couldn't see the path, you did." Ranger let out a slow, content breath, then rested his head against Cole's chest. The moment felt carved out of time itself, suspended between the weight of the past and the wide-open possibility of what would come next. Lights flickered on along the valley trails. Volunteers headed towards the cabins. Somewhere behind them, someone strummed a guitar. The foundation wasn't quiet tonight. It was alive. Alive because one dog refused to give up on a man who had nearly given up on himself. And now, a year later, the story wasn't about gold, or danger, or even survival. It was about what loyalty built. Cole looked down at Ranger again, gently tapping the dog's chest. "You ready for whatever comes next?" Ranger blinked, then nudged Cole's hand with the tip of his nose. A simple, steadfast yes. The evening deepened. The valley breathed. And for the first time since returning from war, Cole felt completely grounded, fully present, exactly where he was meant to be. He whispered into the quiet, almost to himself, almost to the world. This place exists because of him. Then the camera panned wide across the valley, the foundation thriving, the cabins warm, the old treehouse glowing softly in the twilight, and the silhouette of a man and his dog sitting side by side. A final message echoed like a heartbeat. Every loyal dog carries a story. And sometimes that story saves a life. What's your story with a loyal pet? Share it with us below. And if you believe in stories of courage, healing, and second chances, don't forget to follow German Shepherd, where the bond between humans and their dogs lives on.